The RTE Rugby Podcast, sponsored by Canterbury. See the new Irish men and women's rugby jerseys at canterbury.com.
And I'm delighted to say I have Ireland and Munster's Andrew Conway with me for this RTE Rugby Podcast special. Andrew, how are you?
Good, thanks. Yourself?
Not so bad, not so bad. Obviously, there's a job to do this weekend and that's your full focus. But with the squad announced yesterday, you're in it for the Six Nations. When you see the likes of Michael Lowry and Robert Balakoon and Mac Hansen in the squad, what does that say to you? Are you comfortable enough in your own game and you know what the coaches want, that you stay like that? Or is there some parts of their game that you reckon maybe the coaches like that? Will I try this out?
I don't know. I suppose any squad you're ever in, there's going to be, in the back three, there's going to be 5 or 6 other guys that have different styles to you. Some might be similar, some might be completely different. And you got to probably own your own style and keep trying to grow with that. So you can only but learn from the likes of those lads, Michael Lowry, Rob Balakoon, who are playing unbelievable rugby, and they've been in camp before. So I've seen what they can do firsthand. The training pitch, they're obviously playing really, really strong rugby for Ulster at the moment. So it's exciting to go in and have a couple of fresh-ish faces. And the fact that they've been there before, but probably don't have that same level of experience as other guys, but they bring in that bit of freshness. They're exciting players, obviously. So yeah, I'm buzzing to work with them.
You don't read between the lines or anything from the aspects of their game that might be appealing to Andy Farrell and try to increase your own variety.
I wouldn't say that at all. No, I think you stick to yourself. You try and learn from everyone, but I wouldn't be picking through the squad and thinking in the way you're asking the question. No.
Yeah. Ireland under Andy Farrell, it's taken a while and there's been plenty of critics, but the consensus would be from after the England match at the end of the Six Nations and from the autumn games, seem to have forged an identity. Was that a target and a discussion? I mean, has the squad and the management spoken about moving on from what lots of people would have associated as a Joe Schmidt type game plan to how you appear to be playing now on a specific brand that Ireland have tagged on?
I don't know. So like, sport is fickle, as you know. So at the moment, we're coming off the back of some good victories, and I can tell you for sure with the performance that isn't up to the media standard or a loss in a tough, close Six Nations match, you can be full sure that there'll be a few critics again. So we certainly won't get ahead of ourselves and think that we've cultivated this really specific identity or really amazing culture. We understand that it's a week-to-week game. It's a day-to-day game in terms of how you're prepping and processing, and you take each week as it comes. So you try and obviously have one eye on the big picture, but you take your eye off the little details of, like, we're obviously discussing the Six Nations here, but I've got a big match coming up on Sunday against Wasps that I need to put my best foot forward in. For Munster, I can't, like, I'm here chatting to you on a Thursday about Six Nations, but yeah, believe me, I won't be thinking about the Six Nations until after the game on Sunday.
Yeah, I know, but in terms of how Ireland did play, what was that brought up in a group meeting that Andy Farrell says, this is what we are going to do? And then if so, it must have been satisfying to see it play out on the field as you would have imagined it, if that was like a target that had been set.
Yeah, every team has a way they're trying to play, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Our job is to make it work more often than not. So whenever things come together, of course, the satisfaction there. But again, like, to reiterate what I just said, it's a fickle sport, and we can't be trying to do the exact same things we did in November in the Six Nations, or we're gonna find out that teams have reviewed us, looked at us, and it's not going to be good enough. So as satisfying as a couple of months ago was, it was a couple of months ago.
I read in Keith's book, one of the things that stood out was he had spoken about the changes in coaching at Munster, and it was a fundamental problem. It was part of the main reason why it hadn't achieved success or got silverware over the last 10 years. Do you agree with that? And can you just tell me a little bit about how the playing squad feel, knowing that 3 of the senior, the head coach and the defence coach and the senior coach are leaving? What does that do to the players? And do you agree with Keith's assertion about it being a fundamental problem?
Well, it's the nature of the beast, isn't it? obviously you want as much consistency and continuity as possible, but that's the way professional sport is. Some teams get that consistency with a bit of luck, and obviously some good work, and unfortunately for us, we haven't had that complete run of but saying that now, even as I'm saying that, like Johan's been in here for 4 odd years, I think, maybe going on 5. I know he came in November, so it'll probably just be 5 by the time he's leaving. So we have that consistency. So we can blame coaches and consistency all we want, but there's been a fairly core group of players that have been there for the whole time, me included. I've been here for 9 years now. So we got to look at ourselves as well. You know, you can listen to other people's opinions, and you can hear the narrative that's going on and has been going on, and the easy narrative, like you're asking me. But if we look at it from a playing perspective, we haven't been good enough ourselves, and obviously I'm including myself in that. So there's multiple reasons that we haven't got a trophy in the cabinet, but I think the consistency of the coaches isn't at the top. It's the players' performance when it gets down to the business end of the season, and that's the harsh reality of professional sport. We need to be better whenever. We need to get ourselves in the position to win in these. So we're 3 out of 3 obviously at the moment. We need to hopefully be 4 out of 4 on the weekend on Saturday or Sunday, see where the chips fall in terms of our draw, and then players, we need to be better as players whenever it comes down to last 16, and hopefully we progress. So that's my opinion on it.
Very good. And when you did mention there about the opinions and the commentary that's going on at the moment, there's plenty of it in it. Former Munster players who want to have their say. We recorded the main podcast with Glennon today, and aside from being a captain and a player for Munster for years, he actually really spoke from the heart as a Munster fan, a man who has been there from the very start of Munster's journey in Europe. He said he was talking to older Munster fans, and it's hurting them at the moment that they look at the other provinces, see how they're playing. And what would you say to the Munster fans out there who would want reassurance that the way Munster are playing will be able to inflict more damage if we get to a quarter-final or a semi-final or a final this year? What's the message of assurance you'd have? What do you see behind the scenes that gives you the confidence this year would be different?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, in fairness. I think Caroline Curd is in with us. I don't know if you know who she is. She's worked at Limerick over the years. She's worked in 3 of the last 4 years, and three of the times they've won the championship. And so she's brought in a real winning mindset and winning experience. And we've had a few really interesting meetings with her in front of the playing group and the coaches, and we're talking about probably stuff we've never done before. You know, actually including our mental prep as a weekly kind of, it's in our weekly schedule, let's put it that way, you know, which in times gone by in a lot of sporting teams that I've been involved in, it's kind of seen as secondary. So you do all the physical prep, you're training 2 or 3 times a day, 4 or 5 times a week, you obviously play your match, you're doing your physical recovery, but you're kind of half left to your own devices in terms of how you mentally prepare, how you mentally recover from both playing really well, but from playing, say, a poor match, but also in the exact same breath, a match you played well. You know, you see a lot whenever teams played some of their best rugby, the next week they actually play really poor, and how we need to learn why that is. We need someone who's been there and done that with different teams, because it's not specifically about rugby, it's sport. So it's something we're working really hard on behind the scenes. I know there's a massive buy-in from the players and coaches, and we're having different conversations than we've had before. Now, I agree with you as well. Our game needs to grow. Of course it does. We're at the moment we're looking at semi-finals. We've gone to a couple of finals and we haven't won. So there's 100% there needs to be growth in what we're doing on the rugby pitch. But honestly, just as much, if not more importantly, there just needs, we're doing that work behind the scenes with Caroline, who is opening our minds to different ways of thinking, to challenging us in ways that we haven't actually been challenged before. What are we now? We're January, so it's early days. We've been working together for about 6 months, but you can feel the differences in people from different parts of the squad. Say guys who are frustrated maybe that they're not getting games, to guys who are on the back end of the career, and she's working with all those guys, me included, individually, to try and get the best out of ourselves. And then it goes back to what I said of whenever it comes to business end of the season, the semi-finals against the big teams, the big European teams, the big Leinster teams that were ready to go, that were mentally prepared to be able to mix up our game enough and have that freedom and detachment, I suppose, to go out and just and play rugby, and then you're in with the shot, you know.
Okay, I know you've a busy game, or you've a busy couple of days ahead preparing for the game. It's Wasps on Sunday. Sometimes when Munster are up against it, their backs to the walls, they're able to produce this famous performance, but it's something of a dead rubber from your perspective. What do you use for motivation in the absence of, you know, something being on the line at the end of this?
I think you're way off the mark that it's a dead rubber. How is it a dead rubber?
Well, you're already qualified, so if you lose, you're still qualified in that terms. I mean, yeah, and before
obviously then we won't be seeded very strongly, so yeah, it's far from a dead rubber.
Okay, yeah. No, but I was talking about sometimes when Munster have to win a game to stay alive in the competition, we see famous performances and that. So it was just in terms of that. So is that the same if you're just going for a seeding? Is it as motivating as the threat of going out of a competition?
I think we have to win, because if you look at the stats on teams that progress through the knockout rugby, it's the home team. I don't have the figure, but it's well documented that home teams majority of the time are coming out on the other side. So we win on Sunday. Well, obviously I think we're third now. The two teams that are ahead of us will have already played, as far as I know. We'll know what we'll need to do, and obviously it's out of our hands. We might only come third with 5 points as well, but that puts us in the strongest position that we can possibly get to kick on in the competition. So I respectfully disagree with you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I like to hear. So, and finally, is there any part of you that will use some of the outside commentary and some of the criticism to motivate yourselves as well, not just for the game on Sunday, but for the rest of the season?
Not really. Again, like with all due respect, I'm not specifically talking to you here, but we understand why there's criticism 100%. Don't get me wrong. Like we haven't played to our potential in some games, but I also do genuinely believe that a lot of the criticism is over the top in some form. Like, you know, again, there's times that we absolutely need to be better. We need to be a bit more diverse in some of the things that we've done. But I do feel that there is there at times it's just wrong. And listen, I don't expect journalists or whatever to understand the game in the same way we do, because I go into meetings like 4 times a day, 3 times a day to look at rugby. You know what I mean? My job is to understand rugby in its most detailed form, and the guys who are writing about it isn't. It's to write newspaper articles, it's to cover the game, it's to give fans and supporters a bit of a snapshot of what they've seen. So if we're taking what people say in the narrative to heart and using other people's opinions to set our own agendas and set our own opinions, I think we're going to be in big trouble. So again, respectfully, I do understand the game and know what it's about, but it's certainly not something that is going to be inspiring me or motivating me to do better. You know, myself and my teammates have different ways to motivate ourselves.
That's super, Andrew. Listen, thanks very much. I really appreciate your time for joining us here on the RTE Rugby podcast, and best of luck on Sunday and best of luck for the rest of the season.
Thank you. Cheers, mate.
The RTE Rugby podcast, sponsored by Canterbury. See the new Irish men and women's rugby jerseys at canterbury.com.